Back with you tonight, Yon in Focus, and thanks for staying on. The chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance, Joe Maswanganyi, says statements that South Africa will be grey-listed are damaging the country's image. This comes as the Treasury is scrambling to meet the deadline to comply with the regulations of the global anti-money laundering regulator. Greylisting refers to a global effort to prevent illicit funds from being channeled through terrorism or towards terrorism. South Africa will meet increased difficulty in processing cross-border payments should it fail to meet the standards at the Financial Action Task Force, with dire consequences for attracting investment and for the banking sector. Joining us now to explain the Standing Committee's appeal is the chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance, Joe Maswanganyi. Chairperson, good evening and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. You said in Parliament, and I quote, don't bring bills to Parliament that you want processed in 1 month. Parliament is a legislative body, not a department. Did Cabinet, the Ministry of Finance or Treasury drop the ball in as far as amending the laws in the country to come to what the FATF is asking for?
Good evening, Tavo, and the viewers. Yes, the Minister tabled the bill, the General Laws Amendment Bill, which bill we have to amend 5 other legislations in September. And remember, in terms of the public participation model, we have to provide the public 30 days for submissions, either oral or in the written form. So we were worried in the manner that the bill is going to be processed. Be that as it may, we'll try by all means as a committee of Parliament to meet the deadlines. We have also extended the time frame for public hearings, that is oral and written, to the 25th of this month, that's next week. And then on the 28th, National Treasury will respond to the issues that will have been raised by the public, and the committee will officially adopt the report on the 1st of November next month.
Why did it take 11 months for the Ministry and Treasury to deal with this particular matter? I mean, the report came out last year, October already.
I'm not sure. The Minister can speak for himself. The matter has been before the Cabinet from 2017. It's not a new matter. It has been there for quite some time. And we are worried because this is a matter of national interest. It's not just a matter for Treasury. Because if the country is blacklisted or is grey-listed, because there are 2 possibilities. The worst part scenario is that, worst case scenario is that you can be blacklisted. And there are 2 countries, which I won't mention, that are already blacklisted. But there are also almost 24 or so countries which are grey-listed. And South Africa is not one of those. So we are not happy in the manner that things are being done, because if we get grey-listed, it will have got dire consequences for South Africa to attract investment from outside South Africa, for the banking sector in South Africa to do business with other banking entities from the whole world. The image of the country will be tainted, and you don't want it now when the unemployment is almost 35% and the investment flow is very low. But we will work very hard as Parliament that on our side we pass the legislation with the regulations in time. But we are equally worried by those who issue statements saying that they have conducted research and South Africa has got 85% of probability of being a grey-listed. Why issue such kind of a report and not come to Parliament to make submissions and say this is what can be done? Because this is the time when, as South Africans, we have to stand together to make sure that the country is not blacklisted. But to converse that the country will be blacklisted, I think that is unpatriotic.
How do you see yourselves getting around this? Because the people who are saying what you've just mentioned now, are saying that because there's the vagueness as far as what deadline actually we are supposed to meet. I believe the Financial Action Task Force is having a meeting in November to review the status of South Africa and the efforts that they are putting in as far as rectifying those 20 recommendations that were given to South Africa. Now, if you are talking of a 30-day public consultation process, that firmly takes us into November. And I hardly see South Africa going to that meeting saying, well, legislation is still in progress, that being an enough answer to give to this body.
Legislation will be passed in time, and I believe the decision whether South Africa will be greylisted or not will be taken somewhere next year, February, if I'm not mistaken. We'll have to verify the time frames with Treasury. But South Africa will demonstrate that from the legislative sector, this is what's happening, and there is a determination to make sure that we beat the deadline. Remember, it is not only government which is expected to comply, even business. Hence, we are going to amend a number of legislations, including the Companies Act. Companies have to comply. They have come to Parliament as of last week and raised issues. For instance, JSE has raised quite a number of issues of registration that some of the listed companies feel that they will not be able to meet the regulations as stipulated in the proposed amendment bill. The NPOs, including the churches, have also come to Parliament to raise issues. So it's not only government which is expected to comply. Remember, government has to play a governance role and make sure that it enforces regulations. But there are a number of issues whereby the business, NPOs, NGOs must play their part, because money laundering is not conducted by government in the main. It comes through some of the NGOs and NPOs and some businesses which do conduct illicit business in South Africa. So all of us, we must make sure that we don't falter. And at the end, we only want to blame government, only to find the major culprits is business and NPOs.
That is a charged legislative amendment that you're talking about, the one around the mandatory registration of NPOs and other listed businesses. Do you foresee that that is going to be a sticking point that could possibly delay this matter even further, with even legal challenges coming from NPOs and from business?
Before they take government or parliament to court, we have afforded the NPOs. Even yesterday, we had a meeting with Treasury and 43 of the stakeholders who are making submissions, oral or in a written form. They've raised a number of clauses which they are not comfortable with, and Treasury is addressing some of those clauses in the amendment legislation, but it has to make sure that it can't bend too much, because at the end, you have to meet the regulations of FATF. FATF is an international or intergovernmental body which deals with issues of anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism. And if it sets certain policies, it's not for us to come and change them. We have to canvass there at FATF that back home, our stakeholders are not prepared to comply with 1, 2, 3. Can you amend them? But as for now, because they are the regulations of FATF, the country has to meet those regulations. So I don't think it will be proper to threaten court actions. What is important is for the NPOs, and I think they have done that, and they've been given an extension to come back again on the 25th to plead with the Treasury, which Treasury can raise issues with FATF, that there are these challenges that NPOs and business back home are facing. Can't there be some exemptions? Like the issue that you have raised, JSE, for instance, have said there are exemptions in the UK, in the US, and in the EU. in terms of how business is regulated to meet FATF regulations. So what we are doing here is not unique. It's done throughout the world.
The other broader question, as you've put it, that this has been before the cabinet since 2017. Have we neglected the legislative work, particularly in the sphere of state, in terms of what needs to do? Others are saying there's been a juniorization, shall I say, of that sphere of state in terms of people who look at this legislative work.
Let me not go to that field of assessment as to whether we have juniorized government or not. But the question is, this matter has been before executive since 2017. Why they haven't brought it to Parliament in time? They have to take responsibility. Above all, they also have because there are many state organs which are responsible for enforcing FATF policies. The police must deal with, they've got their part which they have to deal with crime, must make sure that South Africa is not a haven of terrorists, the Hawks, SIU, and many other state agencies, intelligence, must make sure that there's no money laundering activity that is conducted in the country, no illicit trade. So we have to make sure that the laws that are there in place are enforced to clamp down on money laundering and terrorism. And I believe that state organs are doing their best. I had, when before we started with our interview, an officer talking about nipping on the bud those who are involved in illicit trade or selling of fuel or petrol or diesel. So we must also commend police officers who are working very hard to chase criminals, be it zamazamas, those who are trading illegally in the mines, because most of the time we come and take platforms and blame law enforcers. But when they do well and nip on the bud, the crime activities, we don't commend them. And I think it is demoralizing on their part. So where credit is due, let's give that credit. So I think Treasury, working together with the justice and the security cluster, will do its best to make sure that it meets the deadlines set by FATF.
You've had 9.5 days or so of public comments. You're already saying that it's more than likely that you are going to extend that. Extend that by how long, and when do you foresee that process of public comments wrapping up?
So far, the stakeholders are satisfied with the time frame that we have allocated them. Yesterday, we had what we call a preliminary response by Treasury. Treasury has given the responses of the issues that they have raised on the first round. The stakeholders are going to study that, and furthermore, if they are not satisfied, they will be able to raise clarity-seeking questions and suggestions. And we believe that on the 28th of this month, when Treasury comes to Parliament, they will be able to address all the issues. But they will also demonstrate to the stakeholders that they can be able to accommodate them up to so far. Because here are the regulations and policies of FATF, which the country has to comply with.
Chairperson, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on tonight. That is the chairperson of the Parliament Standing Committee on Finance, Joe Maswanganyi. Optimistic that indeed legislation will be passed in time before that deadline strikes.